Good morning, Coulterville. Welcome to KNHA-FM, Yosemite Radio. It's 59 degrees at 8 a.m. on Thursday, November 13th, with a projected high of 63 and winds out of the southeast at 10 to 25 miles an hour. Rain is expected today and over the next few days, so the California sun may not be seen so much until about next Tuesday. So it's a rainy day here, right off of Main Street in Coulterville. Today I want to follow up on our interview with Operation New Earth founder Jim Rhodes this morning. We want to expand on the idea that we are featuring a raven in our logo. A few years ago I became fascinated with ravens while photographing birds and other wildlife in national parks. I found out about a book on the social behavior of ravens written by Bernd Heinrich. So I wrote a review of this book and included a lot of other research in the story. Before we get started on the reading, here's a 17th century English folk song I found on YouTube. This old song first appeared in a compilation by Thomas Ravenscroft, published in 1611. It's thought to originate from an earlier carol, Corpus Christi, which indicates that it may have its origin as far back as the 15th century. The song tells the story of a knight that had died. His trusty hounds and hawks protect his body from the three ravens, which is then taken and buried by a fallow doe. The doe is thought to be a metaphor for his pregnant lover. The word leman means beloved. He came to mean sweetheart or mistress. The lover then dies of a broken heart. Check it out.
There were three ravens sat on a tree. Down, hey down, hey down. They were as black as they might be with a down. One of them said to his mate, where shall we our breakfast take? With a down, derry, 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 down, down. Down in yonder greeny field, down, hey down, hey down. There lies a knight slain under his shield with a down. His hounds they lie down at his feet, so well do they their master keep with a down, derry, 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 down, down. His hawks they fly so eagerly, down, hey down, hey down. There is no foul dare near him come with a down. Down there comes a fallow doe, as great with young as she might go, with a down, derry, 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 down, down. She lifted up his bloody head, down, hey down, and kissed the wounds that were so red with a down. She got him up upon her back and carried him to earthen lake with a down, derry, 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 down, down. She buried him before every gentleman, such rocks, such hounds, and such a leman, with a down, derry, 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 down, down.
All right. Now we'll take a little break, and I'll be right back. Here we go, exploring the mind of the raven and the bird's role in human culture and evolution. This is an amazing book by an amazing author. Heinrich is a naturalist of the first rank, champion ultramarathoner, woodsman of skills seldom seen in modern times, and not least, as Mind of the Raven illustrates, a nature writer of uncommon talent. By living with the ravens for many years, literally at home and in the field, he has documented a level of intelligence and social sophistication rarely even dreamed to exist in birds. That's a quote from E.O. Wilson, a hero of mine. Mind of the Raven, Investigations and Adventures with Wolf Birds, by Bernd Heinrich, illustrated, 380 pages, New York. Cliff Street Books, HarperCollins Publishers. Book review and more by Glynn Wilson. From Washington, D.C. Long considered the smartest of birds, ravens are celebrated as gods in some cultures, derided as devils in others. In Scandinavian and Viking culture, the Norse god Odin, sometimes called the raven god, is often depicted with two ravens as advisors serving as his eyes and ears, one named Hugin, for thought, and Munin, meaning memory. As a talking bird, the raven also represents prophecy and insight. Ravens in stories often act as psychopomps, connecting the material world with the world of spirits. As a carrion bird, ravens become associated with the dead and with lost souls. In Swedish folklore, there are ghosts of murdered people without Christian burials. In German stories, they are damned souls. In Greek mythology, ravens are associated with Apollo, the god of prophecy. In Welsh mythology, ravens are repeatedly associated with battles, bravery, and death. The raven is the first species of bird to be mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. In the book of Genesis, Noah releases a raven from the ark after the great flood to test whether the waters have receded. The raven also has a prominent role in the mythologies of indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest. There they consider the raven the creator of the world, but also an incurable trickster, bringing fire to people by stealing it from the sun and stealing salmon only to drop them in rivers all over the world. Ravens can cause trouble for people too. They've been implicated in causing power outages by contaminating insulators on power lines, fouling satellite dishes at the Goldstone Deep Space Site, peeling radar-absorbent material off buildings at the Chenal Lake Naval Weapons Center, pegging holes in airplane wings, stealing golf balls, opening campers' tents, and raiding cars left open at parks. People the world over sense a certain kind of personality in ravens. Ravens have also a prominent place in art and literature, perhaps most famously in the narrative poem The Raven by American writer Edgar Allan Poe. Poe found them a little creepy. The captive ravens at the Tower of London are beloved and perhaps a little feared. Legend has it that if they ever leave the tower, the British Empire will crumble. It's never happened, even when the ravens left, but that's sometimes the nature of human myth. Common ravens can mimic the calls of other bird species. When raised in captivity, they can even imitate human words. One common raven raised from birth was taught to mimic the word nevermore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Experience. In my experience, I've watched and photographed ravens in Shenandoah National Park in Virginia, where over a couple of years while camping during the COVID pandemic, I saw an adult mated pair scour the Matthews Arm campground for food on multiple occasions, coming every day at a certain time and working from the top of the hill down to the entrance of the campground. Satisfied, they would fly away with an audible whoosh, whoosh, whoosh of their massive wings. They could sometimes be very shy birds. These two would not let me get close enough to photograph them, but I did manage to get a few shots with a 1300mm zoom lens. In Yellowstone National Park, after first arriving in the park after the long ascent from the northeast entrance along Beartooth Pass, and after witnessing the bison feed in a meadow with a soft first snowfall just beginning, I got acquainted with a large, tame raven entertaining people in a picnic area. I don't know if it was a male or a female. They say it's hard to tell the difference even for experienced biologists, but it was obvious doing more than scavenging from picnic tables. Visitors had been feeding it, in violation of NPS rules, of course. I had many questions about the behavior I saw. One night over drinks and conversation, a friend and fellow photographer tipped me off to Heinrich's work. So I recently looked it up in the local library and came away understanding the birds in a way I could never have done with my own cursory observations. This is why such science is so great. I don't understand why people who seem to hate education in science. We don't have to observe, wonder, and speculate all the time. Some scientists are willing to go to great lengths to study things, so we all don't have to for ourselves. You can read about it. Science. Considering the amount of science we now have on the biology and social behavior of ravens, it seems a classification mistake to call them common ravens, Corvus corax, except in the sense that they do not seem to be an endangered species. Larger cousin to the American crow and the fish crow, thanks to the sometimes heroic efforts of some biologists such as Bernd Heinrich, we now have quantitative proof that ravens are not just simple sentient beings. Not only do ravens clearly have the ability to experience both positive and negative feelings and pain, they communicate with one another and other species and demonstrate the capacity to cooperate with each other in pairs, groups, and other species, including wolves, dogs, and humans. They show the traits of having mind and memory and the ability to plan ahead, both in pursuit of food and shelter for survival, and for the fun of it sometimes. They also experience grief, just like we do. They've been seen waiting on trees as ewes give birth, then attacking the newborn lambs. They also use their intellect to put together cause and effect. A study in Wyoming discovered that during hunting season, rather than scaring off the birds, the sound of a gunshot draws ravens in to investigate a carcass, whereas the birds ignore sounds that are just as loud but harmless, such as an air horn or a car door slamming. In the New York Times review of the book, nature writer David Quammen seems not so impressed with Heinrich's writing as with his sometimes nearly heroic physical feats in the interest of science. Heinrich is also a world-class marathon winner and record setter. By actual measurement, they are the brainiest of birds, Quammen admits of ravens, although he calls it subjective evidence that they seem more sapient or wise than most other living creatures. Other accounts Quammen calls anecdotal, even though Heinrich provides the results of experiment after experiment in his book, portraying ravens using tools, visualization, high intellectual skills, and even showing foresight. Furthermore, they're famously mischievous, he admits. Ravens steal, deceive, clown around acrobatically, mimic human speech, and play pranks on dogs. In his first book on ravens, published in 1989, Ravens in Winter, Heinrich acknowledged the reverential buzz for the large birds but showed some scientific skepticism, when a review of the literature at that time convinced him that no proof of the raven's singular intelligence has yet been published. But as he began to capture ravens and study them up close, in and outside his cabin in Maine, as well as in the wilds of Vermont, and later Germany, Canada, Iceland, Alaska, even Yellowstone National Park, the long course of field study experiments came together in the book Mind of the Raven. Bernd Heinrich is no ordinary biologist, Quammen admits. He's the sort who combines formidable scientific rigor with a sense of irony and an unslaked, boyish enthusiasm for his subject, and who, even at his current professional age, seems to do a lot of tree climbing in the line of research. And not just any trees. According to the book, pine trees over 100 feet tall with no limbs until sometimes 60 feet up in the air, all in the dead of winter in Maine when a foot of snow covers the ground and the temperature is 20 below zero. He climbs some of the trees in February breeding seasons to raise in captivity to study. I spent one winter getting up every day hours before dawn to climb tall spruce trees near baits I had put out, he reports in the book, to watch raven behavior on a food source. His baits were calf carcasses and other meaty offerings, especially dead deer and other roadkill he collected with the help of graduate students. The whole time he was teaching biology at the University of Vermont. Aside from the pure enjoyment of climbing snowy trees in the dark at sub-zero temperatures, I did it to count birds, Heinrich says. He's committed to the quantitative study and not just qualitative analysis and personal anecdotes, although he does tell a few stories to back up his claims that are not on the face of it quantifiable. Even Quammen admits that Heinrich has a rare ability to embed dense scientific explications within graceful, light-footed nature writing, as in The Bumblebee Economics, his little 1979 classic on the energetics and foraging strategies of bumblebees. Whether he's studying bees, ravens, or African dung beetles, he maintains a strong sense of the ecological fundamentals, asks good questions, and complements his field observations with a manic experimentalism. What Heinrich brings to his research is whether ravens merely pick up useful tricks by observation and then mimic them, as other animals do, such as chimps, monkey see, monkey do, or whether they have the mental capacity to actually analyze situations in their minds and solve problems. Do they have memory in mind? Heinrich studies their social relationships, sharing behavior, and vocal repertoire. He finds that they have the ability to recognize one another as individuals, as well as tell the difference between the humans they come in contact with. He explores their fears, what might be considered their code of morality, and their obsession with play, which he concludes is not just for learning useful behaviors, as it appears to be in other animals. In one of his later experiments, Heinrich ties meat to a string and watches as the ravens figure out how to first pull and work the string up to get the meat off, and then pull the string down from a higher perch, using their feet to hold down the sections of rope. Heinrich describes research journeys to Germany, where German ravens have an entirely unique repertoire of calls and nest in huge birch trees instead of pine trees. Rather than using power pole spikes like Heinrich, the German scientists tied filament line to a rope and then rope ladders to get up in the nesting trees, many of which were old-growth giants that had government protection and were used by the birds year after year. In a remote village in Baffin Island in the Canadian Arctic, an old man tells him of the collaborative relationship that once prevailed between ravens and hunters. Ravens would fly along with hunting parties and make a wing dip move to signal the hunters toward caribou. This story is told in a way showing early belief that with the birds' help, the hunt would be successful and everyone, humans and birds, would end up with a bountiful feast. Yet Heinrich's research and conclusions show skepticism of this tale, and after he witnessed the wing-tipping move in Yellowstone for himself, he indicates that while the move is not likely done to tip hunters off to a food source over the hill, it is more likely a way for ravens to have fun flying in a wind updraft while they go along with the humans on the hunt. Yet it could very well result in such successful hunt outcomes if humans followed the birds, rather than going off in another direction in the forest and the snow. So were the ravens following the hunters, or the hunters following the ravens? Maybe a little bit of both. At the Wolf Research Center in Nova Scotia, Heinrich learns by experiment that ravens prefer to feed in the presence of wolves, which are seen on multiple occasions feeding together peacefully, while ravens tend to avoid some easy food sources provided by humans with no wolves present. In Yellowstone National Park, Heinrich nails the research on ravens hunting and feeding with wolves. This confirms for him that while ravens in Maine and Vermont are often skeptical of food he provides and sometimes take a while, having a long conversation with each other and even doing a little dance near the kill before coming around to feed. It's the absence of wolves which helped give the ravens confidence that no other predators will come around to harass them. Heinrich points out that this evolutionary behavior must go backwards hundreds of thousands of years before hominids came along. After seeing this pattern repeated in Yellowstone, Heinrich begins thinking of ravens as wolf birds, commensal partners of the pack-hunting carnivores on whom they depend on for part of their diet. After seeing the same behavior during an elk hunt in Yellowstone, he documents and extrapolates that the same sort of bond must have connected human hunting bands and ravens as well. The birds are not just following the wolves and hunters to get food for themselves. They have a hard time opening up a deer or elk carcass with their beaks without the help of sharp teeth of the wolves or the sharp knives of the hunters. They also seem to lead wolves, hunters, and other predators to food sources, including bears, which are not as friendly to ravens when they come near a fresh kill. In one documented incident, a brown bear was seen trying to chase away ravens from a fresh kill with swipes of a huge paw, and then laying down on top of a dead calf to keep the birds and wolves from getting their fair share. Ravens are the quintessential northern bird, Heinrich writes. It's no accident that they are also the bird most commonly associated with humans in the culture and folklore of northern people.
There were 3 ravens sat on a tree.